if you look at our planet, our cities are becoming more populated, with places like Tokyo reaching a population of 40 million in the next few years. Will it be the case that so many of our urban neighborhoods, particularly the poor and derelict ones, will they be transformed into wilderness whereof the law of the jungle prevails? You know what? I really hope so. I have in my hand the leaves of 3 trees that have been here, these tree types, since the end of the Ice Age. Now, if I had showed these leaves from trees like these to my parents or their parents, they could look at these leaves and they would identify what tree it was. They could tell you about the wildlife that was associated and the fruits that were on them and the stories, the myths behind each of them. They would look at a hazel tree and the leaf and tell you of its associations with our greatest Celtic warrior, Fionn McCool. They could tell you about the beautiful hazel fruits that they collected in the autumn. They would look at the rowan tree and tell you about its associations with St. Bridget and with the power of female magic. They would look at the hawthorn tree and they would look at its associations with the fairies. And they could take me out on an evening and look up at the sky, and they could tell me what the weather is going to be tomorrow. Now, could we do that today? Many of us, I don't think so. We have lost this serious connect with nature. And for 99% of our time on this planet, we were part of nature. We're not above it, we're part of it, but we have forgotten that. And what we need to do is bring the jungle back where we live. And for many of us, of course, this is the cities. So it's the jungle that we need to come back, because the wilderness is in our genes. 2 million years ago, we lived in trees. 200,000 years ago, our species, Homo sapien, came on the planet. And we lived in relatively harmony with the birds and the bees and all the rest of it. But something went seriously wrong with our connection with nature 10,000 years ago. And you know what it was? We became civilized. Big problem for the rest of the planet. We were able to settle down, and the word civilization or civil comes from the Latin word civitas, for cities. So we started to live in large urban settlements, all made possible by the invention of farming, where we domesticated the plant and the animal. So we had time on our hands, we had comfort on our hands, and we could start inventing things like comedy and sport and drama and arts and making so much more. Sounds great, and it was. But there is a downside associated with civilization or urbanization. What do we do out of that that was bad? Consumerism, mining extraction, and population growth. So we look at how much population has increased, say, in the last 200 years, thanks to technology and thanks to monoculture farming. 1800, we had a population of about 1 billion. Today, it's 7.5 billion. 1800, 3% of our population lived in cities. Now it's 54% and rising. And how do we support urban growth, and how do we support population growth? You know what we did? We attacked the rest of the planet. For this to happen, we spread out, we destroyed habitats, we drained the wetlands, we raised the hills, knocked them down, we drained so much of those wetlands, and deforestation happened as well. And where the habitats disappeared, the wildlife disappeared. And how was that made possible? It was because of our technology. I love technologies, but when I look at plastics and herbicides and pesticides and fossil fuels and nuclear fuels and biofuels and smart devices, they have all scarred the planet. So we have to undo the harm that we're doing because we're part of nature. How do we do it? We have to start for the first time looking at technology, not just to give us a so-called better quality of life, but to help the planet. We should be looking at renewable energies. We should be looking and being helped by data analytics and satellite photography. We can see the changes then in the environment over 100 years and longer, and the melting ice caps and heating of the planet, all of those things. Technology can tell us what is actually happening itself. And that's what we need to do. And we need to talk to the children. If you go into any classroom in a primary school and you talk to an 8 or 9-year-old child and you ask them about trees, or she about trees, and they will tell you trees keep us alive, they give us the oxygen. They take away the bad gases that are causing climate change because of the global warming effect. And we should also look back in time to the ancient ones. I am so proud of the fact that the Irish remained uncivilized for so long. We fought against civilization, particularly in the last 1,200 years with the invaders and the colonists and so on. So people looked down on us, but we had a harmony, the people that lived in this island, with nature. We didn't, if you look at the Irish word tua, it just doesn't mean people. It also, in a geographical area, in a region, it also means that the land that they're on. Under Brehon law, if a tree was cut down, it would be honoured. Something would have to be paid back in compensation. If you looked at where the places of worship were for the Druids, for the pagan Celts, and for the early Christian Celts, it wasn't these big monstrosities of buildings, cathedrals or whatever. We had it out in the forest in the oak grove. And when the invaders came and they destroyed our connection or started the process back in the 17th century, when the forest went, the wildlife went. They hated the wolf, for instance, and the wolf was hunted to extinction. And science is telling us now, so many of the ancient ways and the custom was grounded in science. And the obvious one is the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, and all of that flows for it. So we have to look at the past and learn from it. Now, it is important to realize I am not against cities. I love the vibrancy and the vitality and the creativity and the diversity of cities. I was born in a city. I was born in Dublin. It was a tough place, Dublin, at the time. There was huge unemployment. There was smog in the air. There was a lot of poverty. And I shouldn't glamorize, or I don't want to glamorize the past, and I don't want to glamorize poverty. But in spite of those bad things that were there economically and otherwise, there was a spirit. There was a sense of community. The street was our playground. The neighbors were our family. We played along the streets and the waterways. We walked to school. And in those days, walking and cycling and public transport were just part of life. And I was one of the first generation in the cities from our family that were living in the cities. So we spent the summers going to the farm, going to the bog, working with the country cousins, the aunts and the uncles and the grandpas. So we had still a connection with nature. But have we got that today? And what are we blaming? Am I blaming technology? No, it's how you use it. Technology is fantastic. It has liberated us from drudgery. Backbreaking work in the mines and the factories and the farms is gone, and particularly in the kitchen, it's liberated, and it's women that still, unfortunately, do a lot of the work in the kitchen. The washing machines has made a huge difference. I'm working in the area of the internet. The internet is one of the fantastic developments of all time. You don't need to do research anymore. You do a Google. I don't have to travel to moon to see what the moon is like. I don't have to go into a volcano to see what the inside of a volcano is like, or go down to the bottom of the ocean. I can put on my virtual reality glasses and get that. And look what's coming around the corner. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, robotics. Soon we'll have driverless cars. Soon I can go into a shop, take what I want. There's no checkout because it would automatically, the sensors would pick it up and take it from my bank account. I go home, the temperature's controlled. The fridge is automatically full. Fantastic. You know, great things technology is doing. But look at what we are in our cities at the moment. What defines a modern city? Sadly, there's negativity there. It's vandalism, it's crime, it's fear, it's security, it's isolation, it's loneliness. Yet we're in these great cities, but what we have designed out of them is nature. We're defined by tarmac, we're defined by concrete, and whatever greens exist are only on the sides of the roads, you know? Now, we live in Galway, of course, and I've seen Galway growing from the 70s, and like any city in Ireland, two things defined it from the 60s and the 70s. One was tarmac, the roadways. And secondly was housing estate after housing estate after housing estate, urban sprawl. And that design separated us from our neighbors. How many of you know your neighbors? A lot of us don't know who lives left or right of ourselves. How many of you find it difficult to walk to a school, to a place of worship, to your shop, because these roadways are like shark-infested waters. There's no infrastructure for transport, mass transport, and we have to move away from the car and the petrol to save the planet and have a quality of life, you know? All of those things, cycling, walking, all of that connectivity is gone from our cities. And how do we bring it back? And if you look at technology, I talked about the wonders of technology, but you look at what the web is doing to us. It's isolating us. It is leading on cyberbullying. It's leading to aggression. It's leading to objectification of women online. It's leading to isolation. We are more connected than ever before, but we're less in communication than ever before. So everything, we have to look at how it's impacting us. And our young people, at the moment, they estimate that 20% of our young people in Ireland suffer mental health issues. And why is that? It's increasing all the time because of the stress and the pressure that's partly coming from the internet itself. And also, if you look at nature, it's out. We're pushing it and pushing it and pushing it away. We have problems with our physical health. We have probably the highest rate of obesity in all of Europe. Our young people is 25%. 70% of our population are not doing enough exercise. And we have to get nature back in. We look at children. We should be encouraging them to climb trees and touch it. Why? Because it's proven that nature calms us down. People with ADHD, take them out into a green area, into a forest. It calms people. You go to a hospital, patients, they're planting trees, so it has a calming effect. And it's there because when I look at you, you look like skin and bone, and I mean that as a compliment. You look at me, I'm skin and bone and organs, all the rest of it. But I am also 30 trillion to 300 trillion bugs. That's part of our system, and we need to refreshen it. And how do we do it? By breathing in the air of nature. And what are we breathing in at the moment? We're breathing in cars. What comes from cars? So you're driving along your nice, isolated little car, and what are you doing? You're hurting the people that are walking and cycling and living beside the roadways, because those emissions coming out are toxic, and research is showing now that the metal particulates that are coming out are leading to Alzheimer's and dementia, the present research. So where do we go? Sometimes you feel like a tsunami is hitting you. We have to try to change the world. It's too much for me. I'll just bail out, you know? No, we have to take ownership of the problem because we're part of the problem. And what is global is a problem has to be solved locally. So back in the mid-90s, a load of us scientists, community activists, resident associations, environmentalists, we came together and we saw the way Galway was spreading, and we decided to hold on to the greens we have. And remember, the only greens, we need greens for planning permission, but what are they? They look good percentage-wise, but the side of roads are these horrible, sterile, ecological deserts, manicured lawns in the middle of our state. So we wanted to bring wildlife back into the city. So we earmarked 180 acres along the Terryland River that connects the Corrib water rivers and lakes and streams into East Galway, going through the centre of Galway. And we started in March 2000, and since then 100,000 trees plus have been planted, native trees, ones that came over at the end of the Ice Age. They have a lot more wildlife. Has it made a difference to biodiversity? Yes, it has. Citizen science and third level research has shown that there's over 50 different types of birds attracted in, that there's 6 different species of bats, and there's only 9 species in the whole country. And Michel that's on later, his students in one small area uncovered 98 different types of arthropods, you know. So it is fulfilling that biodiversity thing, and it's bringing us out to nature. But every few years, the council tried to build roads through it, and the park is disconnected by the roads, and we're talking about green bridges, but it's a good start. And it's not just trees. What we are doing, we're taking those sterile lawns, and over the last few years, we planted 10,000 plus wildflowers. And the wildflowers aren't just pretty, they are havens for wildlife. They are nectar-rich environments for our pollinators, our birds and our bees and our moths and so on. And we're talking to local farmers on the far side of the park now to get them to develop bee corridors where we start for the threatened wildlife, for the pollinators, you know. And at the end of it, what do? We cut it, not using mechanization, but we use the handheld side. Thanks to the Coming Afar, the Men's Shed movement, which is with men and women, and the conservation volunteers, we're upskilling our people. Those skills that we used to have, it's all about empowering ourselves, getting our hands dirty, making things again. And they cut the the hay. And what happens with the hay? It makes a cow very happy. Cows in Ireland at the moment are really depressed. They are so bored. They're eating the same bloody thing every day, boring, tasteless grass. So what we're giving them out of this is fodder that's rich in herbs, rich in wildflowers. It's varied. So one is you have a happy cow. Second, you have a healthy cow. Thirdly, we're better because we're getting nutritious meat out of it, you know. Everything is interconnected. One of the big problems with Galway is that we're a city of 80,000 people and we're enclosed, we're cut off. There is no avenues for us to walk in safety and to cycle in safety. It's so farcical. We have on our doorstep one of the most famous landscapes in all of Europe, Connemara. But there is no proper safe cycleway or pedestrian way. It sounds like a joke, but it isn't. And a number of us have got together to develop the old railway line, the 75-kilometre railway line that starts in Galway City and continues on to Clifton. If that is brought back to life as a greenway, it will revitalise the towns and the villages out there. And we have a lot of support out there, but it's a tough struggle. And we're also involved in Greenways, a 40-loop cycle that starts in Terryland, ends in Terryland, takes in 7 castles along the north and the east of the city through bogs and landscapes, and we need to be doing more of that. We have to take ownership of the problems. And we all have to become urban gardeners. We have to bring the farming back into the city. So we've set up with the City Council, who are very good in this aspect, and with the Galway City Partnership and community groups across the city, we're developing community gardens that are organic. It's food for us, but it's also food for wildlife. But most importantly as well is we have to kick the walls of the schools down and get our children out for mental health and for physical health purposes. Look at our children today. We're scared to let them outside. We keep them inside. We throw them a smart device to keep them happy and occupied, you know. Or when we do let them out, we put them in an enclosed area called a playground. We cut them off from a sense of freedom and of wonderment of all of them. We have to get over that. And in Britain, a recent study has shown that in the last 2 decades, children's area of play has shrunk to 90% of what it was. A school outside, every single school should be involved in the environment. We should have the outdoor classroom, not just for physical and mental health, but also for learning purposes. There is so much wonders out there. And when the children plant a tree, you know what they're doing? Or any of us plant a tree, we are planting a universe. When you plant an oak tree, it's home to 450 different types of species. The birds and the bees, the insects, generally the fungi, the flowers, all of those. Isn't that beautiful to be able to say that you created that? So we have to bring a sense of wonder back into nature. We are part of nature. We have contaminated and destroyed it for 10,000 years, and we have to compensate for that because we are part of the planet. And we have to use technology. I love technology. I'm a coder and I train people all over the world. So it's about using technology for the good, for our young people, from digital users to digital creators, and use the apps and all the rest of it. So for our young people and for all of us, it should be a smart device in one hand and a spade in the other. Thank you.